how did you get into this? I mean, is this, yeah, like what's your story? You know, you have a PhD. Is this what you planned to study from the beginning, or what? You know?
Not at all, not at all. So my PhD is in molecular biology, and while I was getting my PhD, I started practicing yoga. I was a runner, and a friend and I were training for the Boston Marathon. I overtrained and developed knee and back problems. So I went to see a physical therapist. They said, stop running and just stretch. Mm-hmm. And as I was leaving the physical therapist's office, I happened to notice an ad for a vigorous yoga class. So I thought, okay, this is a great way to just stretch, but I'll stay in shape and maybe I can still run the marathon. At that point, you know, I equated yoga with tinfoil hats and crystals and, you know,
right.
I did not have a good opinion of yoga. So I went to the first sheet class and the teacher's like, okay, this pose will do this for you and this pose will do that for you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here to stretch. But after just 2 or 3 classes, I really started to notice I was calmer, I was more centered, I was better able to deal with difficult people in my life. Yeah. I wasn't reacting the same way I used to react. And I've been a runner for many years. Yeah. I always stretched before and after I ran. So it was really clear to me that this was not just stretching and it wasn't just exercise, that there was something else to it. Yeah. So as I finished up my PhD, I decided to switch. And I've been doing this research ever since. And I never did run the marathon.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about that study way back before mindfulness was popular.
Yeah, no, that was my first study. Well, actually, it was my second study. But what we're looking at that study was we decided to start with people who had several years of meditation practice, and we compared them to people who had little or no meditation practice. And the purpose of the study was actually not to look at the structure of the brain. We were actually looking at asking some different questions about physiology and the neural regulation of physiology. And around that time, the tools for looking at the structure of the brain were really just being developed, and at Mass General Hospital. And so I thought, let's take a look, because there had been a study published where they had shown that they took people who had never juggled before, they scanned them, they taught them how to juggle, and they looked 3 months later. And then they saw that there was a change in the brain area related to visual motion. And the idea was that what you do changes the shape of the brain. And so I thought, wow, 3 months and you could see changes from juggling, and I thought, wow, my subjects, they've been practicing for years. Yeah, I wonder if there's any difference between their brains and the people who don't practice. So it was a small study. It was only about 15, 20 people. And what we saw, that there were several brain regions where there's more gray matter in the long-term meditators compared to the controls. Yeah. So the next study that we did, we took people who had never ever practiced before, and we put them through an 8-week stress reduction program that used mindfulness meditation. So John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And we compared them to people who were just scanned 8 weeks apart. And we showed that even after just 8 weeks of practice, we could see changes in brain structure and function.
Wow. It's interesting. So that kind of addressed the skeptics a little bit, right?
Yes, very much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it starts to really give some more legitimacy to this practice. Yeah.
So many people back then, when I first proposed doing the study, everyone told me, you're not going to see anything. When people meditate, they just sit there. Nothing is happening. Yeah. But if you actually practice meditation, it's a real mental practice, because you really have to be monitoring what's going on in your mind, and your mind starts to wander. You have to bring it back. It starts to wander. Bring it back. Yeah. So it's a really active process.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about now is some of your recent research, which I believe is focused on pain. And, what can you tell us about what you're learning about pain? And also, I think most of us have a fear of being in pain. That's something that it feels very real. And so what are you learning about pain in your research, current research?
Right. So we did two studies actually. So the first study, we looked at long-term meditators and controls, and we put them in the scanner, and we applied a very mild electric shock to their skin. And we told them to just be mindful of the sensation. And for the controls, they had no meditation experience. So before they went in the scanner, we told them, okay, what mindfulness was. So backing up for a minute first, it's well known that there's lots of different ways to control pain, right? So for instance, I can distract you, right? And you don't feel pain when you're distracted. I can modify your expectations and say, oh, this won't hurt so much, or no pain, no gain. There's different, strategies for sort of, modifying expectation.
Yeah.
One of them, very effective, is placebo. I can put a cream on your hand and say, this cream is going to block it. And so if those strategies are successful, you will not feel the pain. You'll report less pain. All of those look the same in the brain. What happens is that there's two components of pain. One component of pain is the actual sensory experience, the tingling, stabbing, burning, that sensation.
Yeah.
And then there's the, I don't like it, make it stop. And the fear of it and the anticipation and sort of the doing anything you can to
like
stop
the resistance
it.
and
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so those are encoded in two different parts of the brain. So the sensory cortex is the stabbing, burning, tingling sensation. And the front of the brain is the I don't like it, make it stop, trying to control it. And what we see with these other forms of pain control, so the distraction and placebo and cognitive restructuring, is at the front of the brain, which is all about control and executive control, turns on, and it turns off sensory cortex. So you literally just don't feel the pain because the front of the brain tells sensory cortex, just don't feel it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the signal just doesn't come up into the brain.
Yeah.
With mindfulness, you see the exact opposite. With mindfulness, the front of the brain turns off and the sensory cortex becomes more active. Now, when we first saw this, we were a little bit like, huh? But then we thought about it. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is pay attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally.
Yes.
So they're paying attention, right? They're really, really paying attention. So they're paying even more attention to it while it's being, the pain is being applied. And the front of the brain, the judgy part of the brain is being turned off. So we really saw that really nicely. And there's been several other studies by other people who've also shown that the more meditation experience people have, the more the front of the brain gets turned off and the less control there is.
Yeah, interesting. And I think sort of what you're highlighting too is the attitude in the mind has to be one of receptivity, right? Like curiosity, receptivity, as opposed to that resistance and pushing away.
So I think one of the most important questions that's being asked right now is, so we know in general, mindfulness is useful. There's growing evidence that like yoga and Tai Chi and other forms of meditation are also useful. And one of the questions I always get is, well, which is the best, and how to do it. And there's growing evidence that, there's similarities, but there's also differences, so that mindfulness meditation is not the same as compassion meditation. There's similarities, there's some overlap, but there are some differences. The moving practices like Tai Chi and yoga are quite a bit different in some ways to mindfulness. And at this point, we don't know, and it might depend on lots of different factors. So it might be that, people with condition A should do mindfulness and people with condition B should do yoga or Tai Chi. And, we just don't know yet. And that's really an area that really needs to be more fully explored. And so that's a big one. And then also, how to best integrate the mindfulness with what else is being brought. So originally there was just mindfulness-based stress reduction, but there's been more and more research of like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression, and modifying it for specific groups, because the mindfulness is the same, but how do you package the mindfulness to optimally deliver it to, again, either different patient groups or different populations of people. And so that's, I think, really important because again, just culturally, different people hear it differently. Different religious backgrounds, you might to hear things differently. So there's a lot of really useful research on that.
Yeah.
And then my own research, we're actually just finishing up a study now on older adults, because there's been quite a bit of research showing that mindfulness can be useful for promoting cognition. And so one question we were interested in was, well, can we help slow down normal cognitive decline? Because some of our early evidence suggested that mindfulness might help preserve cognition and brain structure and function with aging.
Yeah.
And so stay tuned. We don't have the answers yet, but it's looking promising. So stay tuned. And a lot of the articles have more or less the same structure, which is it starts off with a personal story. There's some person who had all sorts of medical conditions, right? And they went to the doctor, they tried everything medical science could offer them. They didn't get anywhere. They just started meditating. Wow, all their problems are solved. And then my science comes in. They say, oh yes, and see, Harvard researchers say meditation changes your brain, right? And even though my research has absolutely nothing to do with what that person had, so often I feel like the research is being used to just validate all claims about meditation. And so any one little bit of data validates all meditation use.
And that's a disservice.
Because it's definitely clear that for short-term benefits, that there might be other like normal cognitive therapy might be more effective. Like there's a couple of studies that show that normal cognitive therapy is actually more effective over the course of the initial 8 weeks than mindfulness. But then when you look over longer term, you see that, yes, there are benefits to mindfulness. And so ideally, again, you somehow find ways to combine both of them. So you get the benefits of the Western cognitive therapy and the benefits of the mindfulness. And so what I've really come to think and appreciate about apps is that, because long before the internet even existed, there were books, there were tape recordings. I mean, you could go out and get recordings of guided meditations, right? And you can read books, right? And so there's nothing inherently wrong or bad about the apps. The apps just sort of aggregate all the information in one place. And I think they're great as adjuncts or as supplements and supports. But I think one issue, and again, this happened again long before the internet, even when there were just books and audio recordings, is they don't really emphasize the role of the teacher. And I think it's really important to have a teacher. And I was talking to someone, and what kind of clicked for me was that if you're just looking for a way to fall asleep, and if you're just want to take the edge off your stress, and you just want like 5-10 minutes of practice a day, the apps are probably fine. But for people who have serious psychopathology, should definitely have a teacher, just because, again, it can reactivate trauma. You can really get into some weird spaces with meditation if you don't know what you're doing. So I think people are trying to like cure themselves with their meditation, like trying to cure their anxiety, or cure their depression. They should not do that alone. They should definitely be working with both a really good mental health professional and a really good meditation teacher. And definitely people who want to use it for spiritual purposes and spiritual growth, absolutely should be working with a teacher. You should not be trying to figure that out on your own. There's so many dark blind alleys. So
can you just tell the audience a little bit about, or our listeners a little bit about, what a retreat means to you and why you sit them?
Actually just finished one a couple weeks ago.
Perfect.
Here in my house. So the first retreat I ever did, someone just sort of was just like, just do it, just try it. Because my practice, I thought that my practice back then was really horrible. I sat once a week in class, and if my teacher wasn't, the class wasn't held, I didn't sit. I did not have a daily practice. I just sat once a week in class. And so I thought, like, there's no way I could do a retreat. But Sharon Salzberg was just like, just try it, just do it. And she told me, and I've actually heard the story now from multiple people, there's a lot of people who they've never even ever meditated and they go on a retreat.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing to me. Anyway, so
I know, amazing to me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went this week-long retreat, and there was a period of maybe 3 or 4 minutes where my mind got kind of sort of quiet, you know, and I was just like, okay, that was nice. And as it ended, I was like, okay, well, that's nice, but, you know, didn't do me much good, you know, whatever. I get in my car. I'm a very aggressive driver normally. I normally drive 80 miles an hour in the left lane.
You are?
Normally, right? But after this week-long retreat, I get on the highway and I'm doing 60 and feel like, oh my God, this is so fast. And I'm in the right lane and everyone's going by me. I'm like, oh my God, they're crazy.
Oh, that's so funny.
And so it's like, I guess it did have an impact on me, you know? And so it's just like, and yeah, and I've become a much slower, more careful driver since then, obviously. And every retreat is different, you know, and every retreat you see something or you experience something, and you never know what you're going to run into, you know, and sometimes you see a new perspective on a problem, or some old issue comes up that you completely forgot about and you see it, you know, and it's just, you're able to, you realize it's been something that you've been carrying with you and it's been coloring how you interact with other people. And you just let it go. It's really, it's clearing out the closet, you know, it really, it's spring cleaning for your mind and your soul. So one of the number one question I always get asked is, do I really have to sit 40 minutes a day? How long do I have to sit? Do I have to sit more than the 8 weeks?
Yeah.
And so there's growing evidence that, sort of like physical exercise, you know, the more you practice, the more benefit you get. But it's also really clear that even sitting 5-10 minutes a day, you will get some benefit. You won't get as much benefit as sitting 40 minutes a day, but you will get some benefit.
Yes.
And so for people who are like, I don't have half an hour to sit, you know, I can't do this every day, it's okay. Just sit 5-10 minutes a couple times a week.
Yeah.
You will start to see benefits. And gradually, hopefully over time, you can make it a little more frequently and or a little bit longer. And again, I went for years just practicing once a week in class, and that was it. I still felt like I benefited just from going to class once a week. So
absolutely. I would underscore that, Sarah, especially like the 5 to 10 minutes a day, because I think in a way too, it just helps you get comfortable with the discomfort of not doing anything, because that's going to bring some discomfort when you don't have any distraction. So you start to just get used to the discomfort, and then the practice of mindfulness helps you to turn toward the discomfort, right? And then I think that's great.
Yeah. So anything you do is good.
So Sarah, I would just want to thank you again for your willingness to talk with us and to share your research. And you know, for me, honestly, like you are one of my heroes. Seriously, like from way back. I mean, I think about, you know, what you were doing, and you know, at that time there was very little available, and you were a pioneer, and I was just secretly so excited and a secret fan, and I'm so glad that we have become friends and, you know, really sort of done some things together, which has been a real treat, and may it continue. So
indeed, I always love doing programs with you, Tara. So it's And thank you for teaching it, right? Because we need teachers, and we need to bring, especially in corporate settings and in you know, to the general public, you know, just having good teachers is so important. So thank you for all of that. It's a love fest.
Of course. Yeah.